to the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. Today we're going to be taking a look at the next episode, the sixth episode, I believe. Yes, in season 1 of Murder, She Wrote, Hit, Run, and Homicide. Such a wonderful title. As always, as I've been kind of getting it set up, we're going to take a look at the major players here in our game. Naturally, we have Angela Lansbury's back as Jessica Fletcher. Claude Akins, who I've discussed in a previous episode, is back as Captain Ethan Cragg, good friend of Jessica's. Tom Bosley is back as Sheriff Amos Tupper, because we are in Cabot Cove for this. Now, the other ones that we have Daniel O'Brien, who is played by actor Van Johnson, who passed away in 2008. 124 credits to his name. His last roles, let's see now. His last role was 3 Days to a Kill, Commander Howard in 1992. He was in 3 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. One as Daniel O'Brien in 1984, 1986 as Elliot Robinson, and 1990 as Daniel Hannigan. I wonder if Daniel Hannigan and Daniel O'Brien are the same, but I doubt it. What else has he been in? All kinds of stuff. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Fantasy Island he was in an episode of, TV Story The Forgotten Episode, or The Forgotten Story, sorry. He was in a ton of episodes, I think. Nope, just 3 episodes, I guess, of The Love Boat. Not a lot of stuff that he's been in that I know of. So probably not a lot that you guys know. Oh, he was the minstrel in the Batman TV series. Oh, the minstrel. I don't know that Batman villain. I don't know if that's the Batman villain just made up for the TV show or not. The minstrel. Sounds fancy. But yes, there's a few episodes. His first role was uncredited in Too Many Girls, A Chorus Boy, 1940. He's done soundtrack credits, 59 credits, archive footage, 28 credits. He's got some stuff in here. But yeah, not a lot that I know of. But he plays Daniel O'Brien, a friend of Jessica's, who's lived in Cabot Cove for like 6 years, and is an inventor. He's apparently known for the Caine Mutiny, Battleground, The Last Time I Saw Paris, and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. Movies back in 1944 to 1954. Those 4 movies came out in that period. So there you have it. But he plays this friend of Jessica's that's been in Cabot Cove and is an inventor dude. Very much the eccentric inventor type, as we'll discuss. But he's there, as is his nephew, Tony Holliday, played by Edward Albert, who has 132 credits to his name. He's been in more recent stuff, up to... Okay, that's weird. Oh, wait, no. I know what happened, yeah. Edward Albert, he apparently passed away in 2006, but he's got 4 movie credits after that. So that it was probably stuff that was in post-production and didn't come out till then. But he is known for apparently Port Charles, Butterflies Are Free, Guarding Tess, a Nicolas Cage Shirley MacLaine movie, I remember that, and Galaxy of Terror. He's a very pretty boy actor. He's got that handsome chiseled jaw, good looks, and so on. What else has he been? Where's his Power Rangers? He's been in Power Rangers Time Force, Dawn of Destiny, and Power Rangers Time Force, The End of Time, as Mr. Collins. And if you Power Rangers out there, also Power Rangers Time Force Photo Finish, Power Rangers Time Force Quantum Ranger Class for Control, those videos, and the Power Rangers Time Force TV series in 39 episodes as Mr. Collins. So he was in Power Rangers. That's pretty cool. He was in the Max Steel TV series as a voice. What else? What else has he been in? Invasion America, Extreme Ghostbusters as a voice. For the TV, oh, he played the voice of Daredevil, Matthew Murdock, in the Spider-Man TV series in 1996. That's interesting. I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. So yeah, he's been in a few things. Let's see, where is his Murder, She Wrote? Oh, he was Zyra in Deep Space Nine. Good old Star Trek episode. Elliot Birch in many episodes, 10, of the Beauty and the Beast TV series with Ron Perlman, I believe. That's the one. Falcon Crest as Jeff Wainwright for 18 episodes. That's something people may have heard. 1984 Murder, She Wrote. Yep. Tony Holiday, that was the only episode he was in. So there you go. He plays the nephew of our esteemed madcap inventor. And there is a young woman that is his fiancée. Leslie Ander is her name. Andler. And she's played by Patty Darbinville, who is still alive and still in movies. Because she's got some coming out. It's in post-production now, coming out next year. 72 credits. Most known for the movie Real Genius with, I believe, Val Kilmer in 1985. I remember that movie. Another World TV series. De Niro and Snipes. The Fan. She was Ellen Renard in that one. In New York Undercover, she was Lieutenant Virginia Cooper in that television series. So she'd been in a few things. She was Ellie in Rescue Me with, what's his face there? Dennis Leary, if any of you have seen that. She was Rose Boscarelli in Third Watch TV series. She played Lorraine Caluzzo in 3 episodes of The Sopranos. Guiding Light, Selena Davis. Again, New York Undercover, as I said, back in the day. My So-Called Life, she was Amber Vallon. So yeah, she's been in a lot of stuff. Law and Order, a lot of TV, which is pretty cool. Where is it? Murder, She Wrote. Leslie Andler. That's the only episode she's in, Murder, She Wrote. She went on to bigger and better things, I guess. But yes, she was the young and pretty fiancée of Tony Holiday in this one. Then there is, let's see now, we got Charles Woodley. He is a former boss of Mr. O'Brien in this episode, played by Stuart Whitman, who is he's still alive apparently. There's no notification of his death on the IMDb page. Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines. He was Orville Newton in that one. The Comancheros, Paul Regret with John Wayne. Cimarron Strip, Marshall Jim Crown, and he played Jim Fuller in The Mark. Those are the movies he's known for. More recently, he was in the movie Walker, Texas Ranger 3, Deadly Reunion, Laredo Jake Boyd. And was in the TV series as Laredo Jake Boyd. Well, Laredo Jake Boy. That's a that's interesting. Okay, what do we got? The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., 1993. Granville Thorogood. Uh, he played Jonathan Kent in the Superboy TV series back in 1988 to 1992. And he was Charles Woodley in this episode of Murder, She Wrote. Mr. Bonner in Powder Keg in 1986. He was another character in 1987 and another character in 1992. He's been back a few times to play. He also played Mr. Willis in Knots Landing, if any of you have seen that one. Huh. Interesting. So yeah, there's some stuff in there that he's done, which is cool and all. Now let me see here, just a second. What else is there? We've got Dean Merrill. Nope, not him. He's we'll have a look at him anyway. Dean Merrill is played by Bruce Gray. He's Canadian, I believe. Nope. He was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Oh. Okay, most Canadians would know Bruce Gray as the star of the TV series Traitors. Most Americans would recognize him as the father of the groom in My Big Fat Greek Wedding. He's been in Crimson Peak very recently, General Hospital for a number of years, and All My Children. So he's been on the soaps a fair bit. He was Yothers in like 4 episodes of How I Met Your Mother. Falling Skies is Uncle Scott. That's a newer one. He was Joe's dad in the TV series Medium. So he's been in a lot of things. A lot of TV. Gene Wilbanks in Playmakers, the TV series. Queer as Folk TV series. George Schickel. He was in several episodes of that. Yeah, he was in Traitors, as I said. Adam Cunningham. What else is there? Sky Marshal Deans. He was in Starship Troopers back in 1977. He was an interrogator in 2 episodes of Babylon 5. Not an interrogator, he was interrogator. I don't know what that is. Beverly Hills 90210. Where's the Murder, She Wrote? Oh my lord. So he was in that episode of Murder, She Wrote. He was in another episode in 1989. An episode in 1991, an episode in 1993, and an episode in 1994. Now, the interesting thing is, he plays Dean Merrill in this episode. He plays a character called R.L. Pearson in 1989, and then the other 3, he plays the same character, Ted Hartley. So he has a recurring character in this. Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, he played Admiral Chakotay. I don't believe that's an exact a relation to Chakotay on Voyager, but it might be. It might be. So yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff. Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future TV series. Oh my god. Dr. Stuart Power and Mentor. Well, that's old. Oh, I feel old now. I feel all kinds of old. Alright. So yeah, he's got like 171 credits and he's still doing stuff. So good on him. Good on him. Let's see, what else do we got here? What else do we have? And I believe there is one more. I believe this is her. June Allison. She plays a character called Katie Simmons in this. At least I believe it's Katie Simmons. Or is it Lois? Now I don't. Oh, now I can't remember. I believe it's Katie Simmons. I think that's her. So we'll go with that. We'll go with that. She sadly passed away in 2006. Um, but she was doing movies up to 2001. Or TV movies, I guess. A lot of TV movies and TV series. Airwolf, Heart to Heart. She was only in that one episode of Murder, She Wrote. And, she was in The Incredible Hulk as Dr. Kate Lowell back in the day, 1979. So she was in a lot of earlier stuff well before my time. But she plays Katie Simmons in this. And I believe she is the one that is romantically involved with Mr. O'Brien, Daniel O'Brien, in this one, which is cool. So, what is this episode about? Well, this episode kind of opens with a nice panning shot of the Maine coast with lots of seas and everything, and there's some sweeping music, and it starts panning along a road, and then we see somebody bicycling along the road, and then the Murder, She Wrote theme music starts up, and it zooms in, and we see it's Jessica biking along the road, as she does in the opening, and it just keeps playing the wonderful the little do that little music as she bikes into Cabot Cove. Population 3,560. And we see another guy biking, Mr. Daniel O'Brien, who keeps looking down at something he's got in his basket. And it cuts back to Jessica, then cuts back to him as they're coming close. And Jessica sees him coming. He doesn't see her. So Jessica is like ringing the bell and starts yelling at him. They almost run into each other. And he's basically like, you need to watch where you're going. And she's like, I need to watch where I'm going. He's like, no, you need to. And we find out why he was looking down instead of up is he was testing out a new device he's got that monitors your blood pressure through the handlebars of your bike and tells you how fast you're going and everything. To which Jessica's like, well, considering it's saying you're going 22 miles an hour, I think it needs a little work. And he's like, yeah, I think so. He's a bit of the absent-minded scientist in a way. And it really hits home why that is. And then Jessica asks him, since she's got him there, if he's coming to the Cabot Cove Forefathers picnic and clam bake that was rained out last week. So we then end up cutting over to it, and we see a few cars and a black and red van, which will become important later. And there's a baseball game going on. Kids are running around. It's just a nice time that everybody seems to be having. Mr. Ethan Cragg is pitching in the softball game, and Jessica has to extol the virtues of the Founding Fathers, and she's talking with one of her old friends, who ends up talking about how they end up talking about how the Founding Father, one of them, was a pirate, and of course the lady's like, well, we liked his fight, his like Yankee charm and all this and that back in the days. To which Jessica's like, well, yes, but he fought on the side of the British. To which her friend is like, oh, you can't tell people that. Then all of a sudden we see a man running, being chased by a car, which chases him into the park, onto the field, and nearly hits him because he ends up half climbing a fence before it bangs into the fence, and he falls on it, and then the car pulls away and drives off. So all this suddenly happens in front of everybody. And Ethan, it cuts to the next thing outside of Cabot Cove Hospital. Ethan is talking to the good old Sheriff Tupper, trying to basically tell him that the car he saw didn't have a driver. Of course, Sheriff is like, how many six-pack have you had today? So they go in, and the sheriff goes in anyways to talk to Mr. Woodley, who is down visiting Daniel O'Brien, apparently, according to him. And his leg's up in traction, and he's complaining that the doctors are causing him pain unnecessarily. And he explains why he's there. And when the sheriff asks if he got a good look at the driver, he's like, well, I don't want to... You're going to think I'm crazy, but the only chance I had to get a good look at the driver, I could have sworn there was nobody driving it. So, that all happens. Now, the next thing we see, Jessica's stopping by Daniel's and bringing over a pie. And saying hello to the young woman who's staying with Daniel, who's the house guest, who's come down to say hello and whatnot. And she seems like a very nice lady. Of course, I immediately suspected her right away of being the bad guy. I was like, it's probably her. She's probably the one doing it. Now, she goes to take the pie in, and Jessica sees the young man, Tony, and his fiancée heading off, at which point she, calls out to him, and they say hello, and she gets introduced as the fiancée to Tony here, and how she's a door-to-door saleswoman, apparently. And they're going to be getting married, and it's all like super nice and everything. They seem quite happy with each other. So they head off, and Jessica and the other one ends up heading into the workshop. What's her name? Katie. I assume it's Katie. If it's not Katie, like I've just watched the episode and I've completely spaced on the name. But if it's not Katie, you'll have to accept my apologies. So they come into Daniel O'Brien's workshop, and there's a spinning radar dish of sorts. There's like computer, all kinds of tools and equipment, and fluorescent lights and blueprints on the walls. It looks like nothing. I think there's a random satellite dish just sitting in the background. A picture of Albert Einstein on the back wall. He's got like a steel briefcase full of tools. And she goes, Katie, like he's looking for a tool. And she goes and picks up the tool he's looking for, a screwdriver, hands it to him. Because apparently he completely missed it. And it's just tools everywhere and like high-tech gadgets with blinking lights and stuff like that. It looks like a mad scientist's laboratory. Which is kind of interesting. So Jessica ends up talking to Daniel about Mr. Woodley, and that apparently he claimed that he was coming down, to which Daniel ends up getting all angry, and he's like, I wouldn't invite him down unless it was for a hanging and I was controlling the ropes. And it's like, he's pretty angry at this man. Could he be the one doing it? Probably not, but that's the way it always goes. There's always some evidence. So we see a boat pulling in to shore, and a fellow in a suit with a briefcase climbs out. That was Mr. Bryce, I believe it is, Bruce Gray, playing Dean Merrill. He ends up talking to Ethan Craig asking about where he can get a cab, and he's like, no cabs around here. Nearest place, they're all out at the train station. That's about 2 miles in that direction. And he's like, oh. And he's like, I'm trying to get to the hospital. Uh, but Ethan basically says that he can go and talk to old Pete, who will give him a ride anywhere for $5. He's like, well, where's old Pete? He's like, he's at the train station. 2 miles that way. And he's like, where are you trying to get to anyway? He's like, the hospital. He's like, oh, hospital's that way, 1 mile. So we see Mr. Merrill walking down the road, and we see the same station wagon that with no driver that had run down Mr. Woodley, just sitting on the side of the road. And all of a sudden it starts up and pulls out from the side of the road and starts following Mr. Merrill down the road with no driver. And Mr. Merrill is like looking back, seeing the car and gaining on him, and starts running. Oh no, chasing him down the road. There's a good shot of the inside of the car, and there is no driver. Oh my. Now, Mr. Merrill tries to run and climb up a hill, but he ends up slipping and falling back down. And the car comes in, and you see his face looking all scared and everything. And then it cuts to Jessica writing. And Mr. Craig comes in, Ethan, saying that he didn't want to interrupt because he knew she was working, but she'd want to know the news that the man from New York is dead. She's like, Mr. Woodley? He's like, no, his partner, Mr. Merrill. He just came in. He apparently got run over by a car. And a couple of kids out on a farm swear they saw the same car with no driver. But it could be just kids, you know. It's not exactly compelling evidence. But Jessica, Mr. Craig says that Jessica should probably go and help out Amos Tupper because he's clearing his throat a lot. Which has this wonderful little moment of him explaining that Amos, when he doesn't know what to do, he clears his throat a lot. He noticed it because they play checkers together, but he hasn't told Amos about it because he also plays poker with him. That's kind of sneaky, Mr. Craig. That's kind of sneaky. I like this character. So Jessica goes down, bikes down, and to see Amos, and the first thing we see of Amos is him standing there going, clearing his throat. So she goes and gives him some advice, kind of, in that way of, well, I'm sure you've already known to go speak to Mr. Woodley because he's an expert on technology and electronics, and he'd know all about how a car could be remote controlled, and I'm sure you know to do this, and I'm sure you know to do that, kind of giving him these ideas without telling him these ideas, letting him save that face. So he of course says to Jessica that if she would want to come along and help, he wouldn't turn her away. Of course, he respects her opinion that much. So she tags along to help with this case. And they go and question Mr. Woodley again about some of these things in terms of making a drivable car and whatnot. So we find out some information that he's made this particular. He designed a car like that years ago, and he insists that Daniel called him, even though Daniel claims he didn't. So he's like, all I know is what he told me. He wanted to talk, and so he's come down here, complaining the entire time here about the nurses in the hospital and the pain that he's receiving because he's got traction. Then it goes to Daniel O'Brien. They're having a nice barbecue together, chit-chatting and whatnot about this, that, and the other thing. usual topics for small town conversation, and of course the murder comes in as well. So they find out some information because Daniel also explains how he made these technological advancements, how this could be done and that could be done, and the patents that he has. Even though it gets a little angry. Now, it cuts to a brief scene with Jessica talking to Letitia, who's the operator, I think, for the phone company. And she's like, I know it's illegal, but I need you to check a couple numbers for me. It's important. So she basically gets the operator to let her know about certain phone calls. And she goes over to Daniel's to talk to him, but Katie is there. And they have a little discussion that there's only two numbers that were called to Boston from Daniel's house over the last weeks. One of them was a number, and I can't remember what it was. But there was two numbers. One of them was a number of no consequence. The other one, however, was Mr. Woodley's private office line. And Katie knows this because she used to work for Mr. Woodley back in the day, which only strengthened my suspicion of her. So they wonder. We also get to see some more inventions because we've got these. It basically looks like just some metal poles with like little black foam rubber or plastic on it. He gets Daniel to put a couple of these poles up by some rose beds and whatnot. And he claims they're ultrasonic emitters that will scare the aphids and make them go onto somebody else's garden. And that if this works, she's going to get some of these for Christmas. Jessica is. So he fires this up and they don't hear anything. And he's like, no, it's not, the sound that's produced isn't hearable by the human ear. Then you start hearing dogs barking, and about half a dozen dogs come out of nowhere, running and starting sniffing around the poles and the rose beds and kind of digging it up. And everyone but poor Mr. O'Brien, the inventor, is laughing. He's just looking kind of forlorn, like, well, I had a good idea, but it's not working exactly the way I intend. So it cuts over to another dinner that they're finishing up having with Ethan and Jessica and Tony and Leslie. And there's a bit of a discussion that happens here where you find out about Leslie and her trips and certain other things involving poor Daniel. And Jessica, of course, because Mr. Cragg has been out with Sheriff Tupper trying to find that car, and he thinks that this car was put in a moving van and traveled somewhere else. Of course, Jessica explains about these old back roads and that they could be hiding there, and Ethan is like, you couldn't hide anything there. And Jessica's like, oh, I wouldn't know. If you went jogging, you would know that there's at least a dozen ways in and out of those roads that you could find. So she goes to tell Amos Tupper the next day about it. And Amos Tupper is basically like, nope, no. I said no and I mean no. He's like, I'm not wasting any more taxpayer money. And of course, he's not going to be doing it because he basically made a fool of himself the last day he was out with everybody. So he tells Jessica that if she finds anything to come and let him know. So Jessica goes to do just that. She hops on her bike and goes pedaling down the back roads. And what does she find back there? She finds an old station wagon with nobody in it. Just sitting there, all alone. But the interesting thing is, while she was biking up, she was pausing, and she saw a glint off of the mirror. And I'm pretty sure that while she was biking, when she stopped, that glint coming from the sun off of the mirror was a lure. Because, if I recall correctly, while this was happening, while she was there, that glint off the mirror was being held by a hand. Somebody was holding a hand for the mirror to draw her in. So she finds the car, and while she's examining it, there is a van that rolls up in the distance. A black and red van. Yes, remember that black and red van I mentioned earlier? Rolls up, and we don't see who's driving it, but we see someone inside turning on a control panel that has a number of switches and lights, that has like ignition, shift, door, lock, steering, brakes, on and off. And while she's trying to get out of the car, it starts up and starts driving down this dirt road, and the black and red van follows after her. And what happens next is a high-speed chase through Cabot Cove as Jessica tries to steer the car, but it's driving itself. And it's whipping around those roads. It's going fast. The van is following close behind, probably to keep it in range. We see the car barrel past a couple of fishermen walking along the road. They don't seem to stop or be too concerned. One of them is like, "Is that Jessica Fletcher there driving?" And the other one's like, "Yep." It's just absolutely weird little moment that it had in here. And they head into town, driving through town, driving out the other side. But while they're driving through town, they end up passing Captain Ethan Cragg in his truck. And he sees Jessica, so he's like, "Well, I'm going to have to turn around and follow them." So he goes and passes that black and red van, turns around, and follows after them as the chase continues out along the coast to the Cabot Cove Lighthouse, where it almost drives Jessica right off the side of the cliff that the lighthouse is on. It's like very close. But as Ethan is following her close to the edge, as she's driving right for it, that van ends up pulling up, stopping and flicking a switch for the brakes, which makes the car screech to a stop with feet to spare from plunging into the ocean in a car. So Ethan goes and hops out and tries to get the door unlocked, and since he's not having any trouble or not having any success getting that door open, he sees the van pull away, and before it does, somebody like turns the remote control off, and that black and red van drives off. And Ethan manages to get the door open, and the first thing out of Jessica's mouth when he's like, "Jessica, are you okay?" She's like, "And you wonder why I don't want to drive." So we see her having a tea in the sheriff's office, and Ethan's got it to her, and the sheriff's back in, and they ended up taking a look at that car and finding papers and blueprints with Daniel's name all over them in the back seat of the car. So the sheriff's gonna have to bring Daniel in. Daniel ends up looking through his effects with the sheriff there helping to hopefully find those blueprints that are supposedly missing. And they have a wonderful little discussion. Of course, Daniel ends up finding them, and the sheriff's like, I'm still going to have to bring you in because this is motive. So they go and bring Daniel in. Tony goes off with his fiancée to get a sheriff for him. Or not sheriff, listen to me, to get a lawyer. We see a little scene with Leslie and Tony where Leslie is kind of saying that maybe they should get his uncle looked at. Maybe get him, evaluated. Because maybe he might be a little bit crazy. She kind of has those thoughts, and he brushes them off, really. Or at least it seems that he brushes them off. We see Jessica and Katie having a little bit of a talk, a heart-to-heart. And it is quite interesting because Katie is worried that Daniel isn't going to be liking being in jail. So Jessica goes and pays him a visit. Even though for that scene, the door is wide open in the jail cell. I mean, this is Cabot Cove. It's a small place. But Daniel is kind of very much wondering if maybe he could have done it. Maybe he's schizoid, as he says. Maybe he's like Jekyll and Hyde. And of course, Jessica's like, no, you didn't do it, Daniel. Don't be silly. So Jessica leaves and you see her walking her bike when Tony comes by in his car. And find out Jessica has a flat tire. So he offers to give her a drive home. And during the drive, he ends up bringing up the fact of getting a psychiatric evaluation for his uncle. That little seed that was planted in there by Leslie. And they go and check. They go and pick up some gas because he's like, the gauge is acting up and he's not sure how much his fiancée used when she went to Portland for her stuff. So they pull up to the gas station, check the oil and whatnot. And he gets the car filled up. And it comes to like $7 and change for that gas. So at that point, Jessica pretends to have something in her eye and asks for tissue in the glove compartment. So she goes and opens the glove compartment to get a tissue, but also to look at the New England car rental that Leslie Andler had. And she found the miles on the car before she grabs the tissue and pretends to finish wiping her eye. Why would she do that? Is she suspecting Leslie? Hard to say. We see a little bit of Mr. O'Brien in his workshop, kind of looking sad as he heads out and shuts all the lights off, like it's the end of his time here and it's all over. It's a bit of a sad moment. He goes off with Tony. We see Jessica then at the grocery store having a bit of a conversation with the teller there because they just installed a new video game system. And we hear someone over there having a blast playing it. And she goes and wanders over and it's Captain Craig playing a video game. And even though it's not a game, he says, it's a test of skill, hand-eye coordination. Of course, she's talking to Mr. Craig about the case, causing him to keep crashing in the game. And he says pretty much the same thing anyone who's ever played games has said to their parents. It's like, look what you made me do. You made me crash. You made me die. So she's like, it's a game, Ian. He's like, it's not a game, it's a skill, a test. And he's like, I'll give you a quarter, you play the game. So Jessica starts playing the game. And of course, Mr. Cragg is offering his 2 cents. And one of the things he says is to ease off the speed a little bit till she gets used to it. And at that point, Jessica has one of her moments where she's like, I got it. I know what happened. So she goes and runs off, leaving the game with like 40 seconds. So he goes and plays. And everyone starts getting brought over to the park by Sheriff Tupper. You got Katie, you got Mr. Woodley, Tony, Daniel, and Leslie, all over there at the park. Because they're going to have a little bit of a recreation. See if we can jog some memories, according to Sheriff Tupper. Now, when it all gets started, Sheriff goes over with Mr. Woodley, who's walking with a cane, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, that station wagon comes back with no one driving it, chasing after Mr. Woodley, who throws the cane away and just starts running to beat the band. Oh my. But there's also, we see a black and red van there as well. Oh no, what's going on? It's going to hit him. It's going to hit him. And Leslie sees that black and red van and runs right to it, reaching inside, looking for the control mechanism, which Mr. Ethan Cragg was piloting. So the Mr. Woodley didn't get hit, but did get arrested, because Jessica wants to know why Leslie was running off to this van. And she's like, well, I was coming here to get in the van to stop the car. It's a big van. It could stop it, right? That makes sense. She's like, no. I think you were coming here because you thought this is where the control mechanism was. Because the miles out on the rental car that she filled out, she got to look at that and look at what the miles on the odometer currently was, and figured out there was no way she could have gone to Portland with that car because there wasn't enough mileage on it. So that should have been like that, as well as other little things. Of course, she said that it was all Mr. Woodley's idea. Mr. Woodley is like, you say nothing. You shut up. And she's like, nope, I'm not taking the blame for this. If I go down, you go down. So that was a complete surprise to me. I was thinking it was one person, but no, it was a team. The plan was that because of Daniel O'Brien, because he was, all of his plans and his patents were going to go to the university when he died so that they could use them. They couldn't just kill him. They needed to discredit him. So the way to do that is to make him seem like he's unhinged and unstable. And not only that, but Mr. Woodley had his partner come out here, kill his partner, so he gets all the company. Then if Mr. O'Brien there goes and gets himself locked up, everything he has would go to Tony. And Leslie was going to be marrying Tony, controlling him, and thus controlling all the patents and everything. So it was a team up that they were going to do. And Jessica figured it out because when she was in the car, it was driving very fast. But when it was coming after Mr. Woodley, it was driving slow enough to let him get all the way across the outfield, nearly to the fence, before it caught up to him. So that was going pretty slow. So the goal wasn't to kill Mr. Woodley, but to make it look like he is. Mr. Cragg and Miss Fletcher go and sneak out, and leaving Mr. O'Brien and Katie together, because Mr. O'Brien is quite in love with Miss Katie there. Meanwhile, Mr. Cragg is going back to the supermarket because they're having a little tournament on the video game, and because he's the record holder, he needs to defend his title. Jessica wants to go with as well because she's been practicing, she says. At which point Ethan's like, how much have you been practicing? And Jessica gives him a bit of a look, and roll credits. The episode is over. So it was a fun little episode that they had here. Really, really interesting and whatnot. Definitely had a bit more of a byplay between Mr. Cragg and Jessica Fletcher. There might be a bit of a future there, maybe. I don't know. But yes, dealing with remote control cars and technology and stuff like that. There's a little bit of a talk about the technology having been already developed like years ago, but not put into practice because it's too costly to make, which is one of those things that you have to. It's one of them things that's always in big businesses. So that's the episode we have here for the Murder, She Wrote, Hit, Run, and Homicide. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. And throw a comment in the comment section. What do you think of this particular episode? I quite enjoyed it. It was rather interesting. I'm looking forward to the next episode, which we will be getting to in a couple weeks. Next episode is called We're Off to Kill the Wizard. So that could be interesting. There's apparently a nasty scheme involving a theme park creator while visiting relatives. So we get to see more of Jessica's relatives. Interesting. So yes, I will see you next time for more murder.